Hello everyone. So in this video, I'm going to explain some of the applications of direct sequence spectrum signals. See, in my last videos, I explained how exactly we are going to spread the bandwidth uh, of the required signal over the large bandwidth. So the narrow bandwidth signals are expanded into a wide bandwidth signals by using PN sequence, that is pseudo-random sequence, and we are transmitting by using a low power. Intentionally, we are transmitting with a low power with a wide bandwidth. Advantage of this is, as I said, interference. We can avoid interference or anti-jamming. So this is basically one of the application of direct sequence spectrum. Apart from this, we have some more applications. That is, another application is low detectability of signal transmission. The next one is code division multiple access. So this DSSS is used in the CDMA technique. Communication over channel with a multipath propagation. Wireless LANs. So wireless LAN communication. We use direct sequence spectrum. Now, what is the use of, or how exactly it is done by these methods? We will understand one by one now. Now, in the first method, the advantage or application, that is low detectability signal transmission. The meaning of this here is we are transmitting the signal in the DSSS or in this spectrum technique by using a very low power level. We are transmitting by using a very low power level compared to the background noise, channel noise, as well as whatever the noises are generated in the transmitter or maybe in the receiver, the front end of the receiver. Compared to those powers, we are transmitting intentionally with a very low power. Now just assume that my signal is occupied a bandwidth of around W hertz, and the noise is having a power spectral density of say N0 watts per hertz, and the average noise power what we can calculate is about here Pn is equal to W into N0. That is the average noise power. So this is the average noise power what we can have here. This is the average noise power what we can have. Now, what is the average, assuming that the average signal power is PR, and I know what is the noise power also, Pn. What should be the power at which we have to transmit the signal? So that is given by, it is the ratio of that PR to Pn, that is the received power, the power of the received signal to the noise power should be always very much less than 1. That means PR should be very much less than compared to the noise power or interference power. So that is the requirement in the low detectability signal transmission. So under this condition also, what we can say is, in the presence of background noise or maybe the thermal noise or whatever, still my receiver will recover the signal because of what is called the processing gain and the coding gain. Now, as I told in my last video again, what is processing gain? Processing gain is the ratio of W2 as a ratio of the spreaded signal, the bandwidth of the spreaded signal to unspreaded signal, or how it is related to the noise interference power in the output of the demodulator. So it is actually given by what? It is given by say I naught R is actually equal to, you can say the I naught R is actually equal to, it is Pi divided by processing gain. That is, we can say that this I naught, or so PSD of the noise multiplied by the bit rate is actually equal to, you can say it is Pi, that is the power, interference power at the input of the receiver divided by LC. So we have something called as LC here, processing gain, which we get because of the spread spectrum technique we have used, because of the PN sequence. So as this LC is very large, usually we consider the output power is very less. So in a way you can say that this is going to eliminate the interference. whatever that channel noise or thermal noise, whatever interference is happening with my signal will be eliminated because of the processing gain what we have from the direct sequence spread spectrum technique. Apart from that, we are using a channel coding technique also, and that also going to add for removal of the noise. So these two terms are very, very important. So this will decide what is the amount of interference has been eliminated, right? So that means in a way you can again say that some security is also added because of this spread spectrum. How? Because if I don't know what is the PN code sequence used, any unauthorized people is not able to decode my signal. It is very difficult to detect the signal here. It is very difficult to detect the signal, and even if the power is very, very less, if you use the same PN code in the receiver, it is possible to detect the signal in the presence of noise or interference also because of processing gain. This will eliminate the interference, any interference, and those who do not have the knowledge of the PN code used for transmission and the reception, for them it is very difficult to get the information. So in a way you can say that it is detectability is not possible. The detectability is low. They are transmitting the signal with a very, very low power, and because of the spread spectrum technique used, we can say that there is a low probability of being intercepted. So my signal cannot be intercepted by any unauthorized people. So this is one of the application you can say. Now this is a small problem over this the formula. They say we have a DS spread spectrum signal designed to so that the power ratio PR by PN at the intended receiver is around 10 to the power 12, the ratio. If the desired EB by N0 is 10 for acceptable performance, determine the minimum value of the processing gain. So what is the processing gain for these given parameters? That's what we have to calculate. And I think you are familiar with this formula. EB by N0 is equal to PR by PN into LC, or you can say EB by N0 in terms of dB is equal to PR by PN in terms of dB plus processing gain in terms of dB. So LC is a processing gain. Now just substitute the given parameters. This parameter is given and this parameter is given. Find out LC and it comes out to be around 1000 as the processing gain. You can convert that into dB also, no issues. Now this is the first one. Now before going into the second one, that is second application of direct sequence spectrum, that is CDMA, code division multiple access, you have to understand what is FDMA and TDMA also. So FDMA stands for frequency division multiple access. TDMA means time division multiple access. How this CDMA is better than FDMA and CDMA, that we have to understand. Now here, this diagram indicates the FDMA, frequency division multiple access. You know FDM and TDM, right? So frequency division multiple access means whatever the overall bandwidth I have. So this is the overall bandwidth. Let us say this is the overall bandwidth. Okay, it is divided into number of channels, or these frequencies divided into the overall bandwidth is divided into smaller frequency slots, and each frequency slot is considered as channel and given to the different people, different purpose. Say channel 1, channel 2, channel 3 maybe. So this is, let us say we are using this in the mobile communication. Let's say GSM mobiles, global system for mobile. So channel 1, channel 2 like that. So this channel 1 is given to one particular user and mobile user. This is given to second user, third user, and at the same time we can use all these channels. That is frequency division multiple access. The entire frequency range is divided into number of frequency slots, and this, say let us say it is divided into 6 frequency slots, and at a time 6 users can be accommodated. 6 people can communicate within a particular area. In the same time they can talk to different people. That is frequency division multiple access. Now what about time division multiple access? See, the time division multiple access, let us say we have a entire frequency maybe, or it can be divided into number of frequency slots as in FDMA like this, and each channel can be given to a different user in a different time slot. It is see, in this case, in this figure, entire frequency range, the overall bandwidth is given to different users in a different time. That is time slots, we can say. Here are frequency slots I have, here are time slots I have. So same frequency is given to different users in a different time interval, and once that rotation is done, given back to the first user again. Say I am accommodating, say some 6 users over here, channel 1 to channel 6, what they have given. So once the channel, this is at one particular instant of time, say for 1 millisecond it is given to this person, second 2 milliseconds, second time slot, third time slot for 1 millisecond, fourth time slot for 1 millisecond, fifth time slot 1 millisecond, sixth time slot for 1 millisecond, different users, again given to the first user. The same channel is given to the user. So this is FDMA and this is TDMA. We can say this is FDMA, this is TDMA. In a GSM, both FDMA and TDMAs are used. That means we divide the entire frequency range into number of slots, and each slot is given to a particular user on a particular time instant and given back later after a certain time interval. This concept is FDMA along with TDMA in the GSM. Let us say we have a frequency ranges over here for the GSM FDMA. This is for uplink frequency, this is the downlink frequency. Uplink means mobile to the base station communication, base station to the mobile communication is the downlink channel. We have a range of frequencies we have from 890 megahertz to 915 megahertz. That is the overall bandwidth, you can say, the difference between highest and lowest frequency for an uplink. For a downlink, it is 935 megahertz to 960 megahertz. 25 megahertz of channel bandwidth is allocated for a downlink, 25 megahertz for uplink. They are separated by around 45 megahertz of range. This is not used for GSM. Now, how this FDMA is implemented? This entire bandwidth is divided into around 124 channels, and each with a time frequency slot of around 200 kilohertz. 200 kilohertz is the channel bandwidth, and this is the overall bandwidth. That is 25 megahertz. 25 megahertz divided by 200 kilohertz will give you around 124 radio channels for a downlink, and for uplink also similar number of channels. Fine. Now each channel, let us say we have a number of channels over here. So channel 1, let's consider one channel. This single channel with a bandwidth of 200 kilohertz, the TDMA, what is done is, it is given to 8 users on the time sharing basis, time slots. The time slot is roughly around, say, some 0.577 milliseconds. That's the time slot, 0.577 milliseconds of the time slot. Multiply by 8, 4 point something actually you get. That will be the overall time slot for this channel. Once it is, see, for this particular time instant, it is given to a first user, second user, third user, seventh user, and again the same channel is given to the first user on the time sharing basis. This is called TDMA and FDMA. So the disadvantage is we cannot accommodate more and more users at the same time by using this technique. So we have to go for the technique called code division multiple access. See, code division multiple access means we use a PN code, pseudo-random code for expanding the bandwidth. That means in this particular method, what exactly we do is we use this entire bandwidth of whatever the allocated for a mobile communication, and all the users are actually spreading their signal over the entire bandwidth, and they are transmitting at the same interval of time. Now what can happen is interference. So for my signal, the remaining, say, around 65 people are transmitting at the same time. One among them is my signal. So for my signal, the remaining 64 now signals, whatever are there, will be act like an interference. It acts like an interference. But the advantage of spread spectrum is the interference can be very easily removed by using coding gain and the processing gain. So that means these two parameters, the processing gain and the coding gain, are the very, very important parameter which will define a performance of the direct sequence spread spectrum. Because of the processing gain and the coding gain, we can avoid the interference. I explained already that in the last slide. So we are spreading over a large bandwidth, and I said 65 users. These 65 users are actually in the transmitting side and receiving side. They are using the same PN code. Not all the 65 users. Say one user. So I'm a user. I'm talking to a particular person. I and sender and the receiver both are using the same PN code. So at the same time, suppose 65 users are using the channel, 65 PN codes are required. So if I have a PN code, then only I can communicate properly over here. That communication or the voice signals can be decoded by using the same PN code. And other signals act like an interference. So we have as you know, it is shown here, as we have a distinct signature code. The signature code is a PN code. We have a distinct PN code which is used in the code division multiple access. And other signal act like an interference for us. Now, so when you are demodulating the signal, what exactly happens? So these signals will act like an interference. Anyway, because of the processing gain and coding gain will be removed, those channels, those signals will be eliminated by my receiver, and only my signal will be demodulated properly and delivered to the destination. The advantage of CDMA is here, we can as much as possible, as much as say, my system can tolerate a interference, we can add more and more number of users. Say at a particular level, if we cannot tolerate, the system cannot tolerate the interference, you stop adding the users. That is the advantage compared to TDMA and FDMA. We can add new users in the mobile communication, or we can remove the users, and that is very easy in case of CDMA compared to TDMA as well as FDMA. This is the advantage of CDMA. Now, how many users, number of simultaneous users can be accommodated? So this is a small formula for that. Assuming that all are transmitting with the same identical average power, but the receiving power will change depending on their location from the base station. Say I have a base station. Somewhere here I have a base station. This is the area covered by this particular base station. This is called cell, and I have a number of users. Say somewhere here I have one user. I have one more user maybe somewhere here, let us say, one more user somewhere here, let us say, some more user maybe here, very close to base station, maybe away from the base station. Depending on their location, the received power by the base station will change. Now, how to calculate the number of simultaneous users? There's a small formula for that. In terms of, I said, amount of interference, depending on the amount of interference, we can add more number of users. So that the ratio of the signal to the noise ratio or interference ratio is given by 1 divided by NU minus 1, where NU is the number of simultaneous users. So this is inversely proportional. When I increase the number of users here, this ratio will come down. That is, signal power to the noise power ratio will come down. That means more and more interference I can say. If the number of users are less, signal to the noise ratio will be higher. That means interference effect will be less. So as long as my system holds or tolerates the amount of the noise or signal to noise interference power ratio, I can add those many users. This is the advantage of CDMA by using direct sequence spectrum. So it's a small problem over here. Suppose that desired level of performance for a user in a CDMA system is an error probability of 10 power minus 6, which is achieved when EB by I0 ratio is around 20 or 13 dB. Determine the maximum number of simultaneous users that can be accommodated in the CDMA system if the bandwidth to the bitrate ratio is 1000 and the coding gain is given by 4. That is RCDH minimum, having distance minimum is 4. That is CG. So we know this formula, the relationship between this PI to PS ratio. This is PI to PS ratio, remember. Whatever I gave earlier is PS to the PN ratio. PN is PI, let us say, interference or the noise power. So I know this PI by PS is equal to W by R, CG in dB minus EB by I0. This formula I know. And this is PI by PS is a reciprocal of the previous equation. So NU minus 1. NU minus 1 divided by 1 is ultimately NU minus 1. So PI by PS is NU minus 1 from this formula. Now, I can, without dB, I represented the formula here in terms of EB by I0. So this EB by I0, or we can say this PI by PS is actually equal to W by R multiplied by CG divided by EB by I0. Correct? Or EB by I0 is given by W by R divided by PI by PS. PI by PS is equal to NU minus 1 into the coding gain, which is equal to 20. So 20 they have given, EB by I0 is 20. So I want to find out what is NU is. So just rearrange the equation, substitute all these things. W by R is given, right? W by R is given as 1000. This is given as 4. 20 plus 1 will give you 200 watt. So that means for these parameters, the number of simultaneous users what we can have in a mobile communication or environment is 200 watt. Fine. Now I'll go to the next application, that is communication over a channel with a multi-path propagation. Usually in the wireless communication or wireless channels, multi-path propagation is one of the major problem. Multi-path propagation means, just look at this diagram. When I transmit a signal from the base station, let us say base station, towards the mobile station or a mobile, signal travels not only in the direct path, but it will take a several multiple paths and reaches the mobile. So this is called a direct path, line of sight path. These are all the secondary paths, indirect paths. It hits the hill, it hits the building, it hits a several reflection, refraction, diffraction, whatever you say. It takes a multiple path, and because of these reasons, signal will be received by the receiver by using multiple paths. Now what happens here is this travels in a direct path, reaches early. This will take a more time to reach, and when the same signal, when it reaches with the multiple paths, we have a different phase, and signal will be constructively or destructively will add up or subtract over here. And because of that, we get a problem called fading. So fading is a major problem in the wireless channel. So fading is the major problem here. This is fading. Fading is nothing but it is constructive or destructive interference, and because of the phase shifting, whatever happens, the signal amplitude will change. It will increase or decrease. If it decreases, then it is a major problem, a destructive interference called fading. So this is called multiple path propagation, multi-path propagation. This is one example in the mobile environment. We take an example of ionospheric propagation. Ionosphere means this region. A region above the ground surface between the distance of around say 50 to 500 or up to 1000 kilometers of range in the sky. That region is called ionosphere. So say satellite communication or some other communication or low earth orbited satellite communication maybe happens through this. Okay. Now signal goes, hits the ionosphere, comes back. Again it may take a several paths. These are all different layers in the sky. E layer, F layer, F1, F2 in the day during the daytime. In the night time it's called only we have called this as F layer together, F1 and F2. Anyway, ionospheric propagation. So here also what can happen is multipath propagation and the fading problem. So how to avoid this problem is we can use a direct spectrum, direct sequence spectrum, and my demodulator or the receiver can be tuned to only the direct path, line of sight path. It is synchronized only to receive only the direct path signal, and these are all will be treated as interference. These are all treated as interference. The multipath signals are treated as interference, and these signals will be eliminated by using direct sequence spectrum. So these interference is actually called as ISI. ISI stands for inter-symbol interference. Now the last application is wireless LAN, local area network. It's a wireless local area network. You may be aware that we have a different standards defined by the IEEE, International Electronic Engineer. That organization has given us standards. Those standards are this: 802.11, 802.11b, 802.11a, 11b, 11c. The upgraded versions are there. So many upgraded versions are there. Used in the wireless LAN. Basically, in this 802.11a, 11b, 11c, most of these standards, wireless LAN applications work with the frequency of around in the range of 2.4 gigahertz. That is the band, 2.4 gigahertz band. It's called 2.4 gigahertz ISM band. Here ISM stands for International Science and Medical Band. This is specifically used for those applications. This is the unlicensed frequency band. That means it is freely available. You don't have to pay. And in this particular 2.4 gigahertz band, see this the frequency is 2.4 gigahertz range. 2.4 gigahertz range. So the 2.4 gigahertz range is in this particular band. It is divided into number of frequency slots. Again, overlapping slots as shown here. Overlapping slots. Totally 14 overlapping slots we have, each with a bandwidth of around 24 megahertz, 22 megahertz, within the range of 2.4 gigahertz range. This is the range 2.412 to 2.484 gigahertz, and each channel, sub-channel or sub-slots are having a frequency bandwidth of around 22 megahertz. So out of these 14 channels, all the channels are not used in the wireless LAN. Few channels are used. Say in America, they are using only around 11 channels. Now, how the spectrum is used in the wireless LAN communication for secured communication? Now, In the 802.11a, let us say the first one, this one, 802.11a. In this particular standard, we are actually using something called as a 11-bit or a 11-chip Barker sequence. 11-bit Barker sequence. It is a PN sequence. Basically, it's a PN sequence. So we studied earlier, say 8-bit or maybe 7-bit or 15-bit, something like that. But this is a 11-bit Barker sequence, which is used to spread the bandwidth of the information signal, and the chip rate is 11 megahertz. This is regenerated at the bandwidth or a chip rate of 11 megahertz with a chip interval of 1 by TC is, or 1 by 11 megahertz is 0.909 microsecond. That is the chip interval. Okay. The 11-bit chip Barker sequence used in the 802.11 is this particular sequence. So here this is represented, the binary data is represented, or a Barker sequence is represented in the polar format. Here 1 means plus 1, binary 1, plus 1 means minus 1 means 0. So the sequence is here, it is 1, 0, 1, 1, 0, 1, 1, 1, 0, 0, 0. This is the 11-bit number PN sequence what is used for expanding the bandwidth into wide bandwidth of 11 megahertz up to 11 megahertz. The advantage of this Barker sequence is it has got an autocorrelation value of around 11, and the side lobe whatever you get in the autocorrelation function, the side lobe is having a size of around only 1 or less than 1. This is the advantage. That's why we go with the Barker sequence. Now, once it is spreaded, we actually use a modulation technique. Like in the DSSS, we use BPSK or maybe QPSK. If I use a binary phase shift keying method, we can achieve a bit rate of total transmission rate of around 1 Mbps, 1 megabits per second. This is the bandwidth we can achieve by using BPSK technique. And same things, we using the same chips, 11 chips per symbol, coding expansion. We can achieve a 2 megabits per second of data rate by using a QPSK technique. Because compared to BPSK, we are transmitting 2 bits are represented by using any one of the 4 phases, correct? So the bandwidth is double compared to the BPSK. Here it is 1 megabits per second, here it is 2 megabits per second. That is the bandwidth we can achieve. Now going to the second part, that is 802.11b. In the second method, 802.11b, again this is operated in the same 2.4 megahertz band only, ISM band only, International Science and Medical Band. Instead of Barker code, what exactly we use here is something called as CCK. The CCK stands for Complementary Code Shift Key, which is a 8-bit sequence. We can generate such an 8-bit sequence, number of 8-bit sequences which are complementary to each other. Complementary code shift key. I'm not going in detail about this generation and all here, but we use something called as CCK. The advantage of this over Barker code is, see the data rate. The data rate what we can achieve in this method 802.11b is 11 megabits per second. So it is advantage over 802.11a. Higher bandwidth, higher data rate of 11 Mbps we can achieve by using this method. So this is in this video I explained about different applications of DSSS. In the next video I will explain second method of spread spectrum called frequency hop spread spectrum. Thank you for watching this video.